Hello everyone, this is Francis. Since we have power failure due to high demands on electricity this day, and so I decided to pre-record my presentation just in case any accident occurred. So in this presentation, I will try to narrow down the authoritarian China nowadays, and especially how personalization made China capable to transform into original powers with great resilience, like from a development-driven and collective leadership type of the region in the past. And I will focus more on the domestic level with the framework provided by Gunhun, like how Xi Jinping eliminate the inside outside the challenges step by step, and the efficiency and danger behind those strategy and the prospective development that I assume. The argument I have kind of challenged the existing hypothesis regarding the aftermath of personalization. I argue that personalization may, like other dimensions of power concentration, more applicable, and those dimensions, though already imposed by many ex-CCP leaders, it is not until Xi Jinping that those approaches evolved and made the region more formidable. And personalization is in China is so successful that not only drew the full stop to the possible transformation within the political system, but also that the concentralization way that she took has also made mass mobilization less capable. And this slide is just a recap of the characteristics and emergence of personalization. And according to Kendall and his colleague, large numbers of the personalist dictator appear after the Cold War. And right now, about 40% of authoritarian regions are ruled by personalist strongmen. And but before the Cold War, before the end of the Cold War, there are only around 23% of them. Like although Gronholm defined personalization that as the kind of the region trait that could apply to all kind of the autocratic region, but we could also see that many democracies also have this trait right now. And the 8 indicator Gunhun took to measure the degree of the personalization are about access to political office and ruling party on the one side, and also the military and the broadly security apparatus on the other side. So I would take the scope of the indicator she has and try to provide existed contextual events and evidence. The characteristic of a personal dictator is that they prioritize loyalty over competence, so that it would result in fragmented, fact, elite, and growing level of fractions. And this strategy decreases their access to accurate information and raising the risk of mixed calculation, and that can lead to false political decision and even sometimes conflict. And there are also some researchers that emphasizing the possibility of aggressive and volatile foreign policies as well. And this is the deepening autocratization framework that Elena Synkonen made. And what I found is particularly it is interesting is that the metaphor of putting autocratization with Tai Chi diagram, you see the circle in the middle. And because the essence of such concepts is to maintain the balance and in order to maintain the survival of the region. And we see that the two arrows beside that if the leaders went too far on one side, that it may result in an irreversible consequence that lead to the breakdown of the regime. And there are basically two levels of the power concentration and autocratization. And on the elite level, authoritarian leadership can increase or decrease power concentration can be measured with personalization, administrative centralization, and control over economy access. But on the societal level, this is about repression, and leaders can also build legitimacy through enhancing in-group coherence and welfare policy and so on. But what I argued is that personalization not only exists in the elite level, the legitimacy that dictator try to gain, like it also has a lot to do with the personalization per se, because the political discourses and such kind of the propaganda are also about the strongman, the survival of the strongman leadership. So now we move to how Xi Jinping concentrates his powers through personalization. Like it is a normal routine that among all the Chinese leaders to establish a 10-year political agenda when they took office, and Xi is no exception as well. And when he took office in 2012, and he had proposed the Chinese Green, the concept, and it defined it as the means to achieve the great rejuvenation of the Chinese national. You could tell there's nationalist discourse that's worked with them. So that based on the Chinese Green, she developed his theory and made it into the constitution in 2018 on the 19th National Congress of CCP, and it is also the same year that she abolished the presidential term limit, and the concrete policies of Chinese Green, including BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, and 2025 Made in China. This is about the industrial upgrading and also poverty alleviation and anti-corruption and stay with strong armed forces. And those 5 policies can be sorted into synchronous framework of autocratization. And now we talked about the anti-corruption and the armed force, those two factors. Anti-corruption policy is a means to control challenge from the insider, and like factions, the competition between the factions as somewhat the core of political analysis of China study before she took office. But after the anti-corruption policy, she had eradicated almost all the remaining force of the former leaders, and such a centralized, personalist, one-party regime become possible. And Alika Francis also mentioned that the power imbalance between Xi and other factions made it increasingly hard for the elite to mobilize opposition that could constrain the leader. The policy that also gained legitimacy for the public as well, that since the most anti-corruption measures are tangled with regulation on financial system, there's another side of the common power concentration is the military field. And since she has claimed in his Chinese dream that it is to build up a strong armed forces, and it is not only about purging the opposition forces, the military. She had also achieved the modernization and the reforms of the People Liberation Army, and such reform that also makes she capable of to apply aggressive posture toward Taiwan and in the South China Sea. And personalist political structure, because you see that it did not undermine the societal control. Instead, the centralization has strengthened the party's state-driven economic achievement. For instance, the growing importance of state-owned enterprises, no matter whether it is in regional or it is from the central, they try to transfer the primary accumulation of capital from private and foreign investment and also the private small business and such kind of a long investment financial system has already exists since the reform in the 80s, but it haven't consolidated yet until she took office. And the shortcoming of such system had, of course, had already emerged in 2008, the financial crisis. Like with three plunge disaster, it was like about housing, about the stock, about the foreign exchange. But what she react to those crises is to create increase the control by the power of the party and instead of the liberalization. Then such authoritarian mode of development also will not the dependent and obedient um, middle class instead of a confrontational middle class. But in addition to the economic factor, like the nationalist discourse is also legitimize the existence of Xi Jinping. It also provide like the framing effects of certain human rights violation and the foreign policy. Like we can see that the aggressive attitude that some of the Chinese people have toward the Hong Kong protests and also in the Xinjiang issues. And the other side of those fixed position and single ideology is the advancing digital surveillance and social credit system. And such system also like it indirectly led to the capability of the CCP to launch a large scale arrest on the right defense lawyer and activists in 2015, the 709 crackdown, and which is quite well known. So having said that what is the future of the personalist China? The Granholm has set up a quite optimistic resource that a personalist regime usually incapable of stopping mass mobilization from happening. So, but what we may need to be asked is, do Chinese people want to resist and mobilize? And if mobilization happen, will the coup-proofing military stand with the people? So far, we could see that the levels of region reliability in China still remain quite high, but a lot of autocracy are like this before the day when they get overthrown. And from the economy perspective, the dependent middle class that we have already mentioned, that may also become one of the reasons that people are lack of the capital and the agency to counter the region. And right now that you may also think about the anti-extradition bill protests in Hong Kong, and this is the case that I think about a lot as well. And but I also wonder is that can the resistance of the Hong Kong people equal to the resistance of the Chinese people? And if they live in this quite completely different political system in the past 20 to 30 years, and this question I also don't have the conclusion right now. Last is was the discussion question. The first one is about nationalism and also the other unique characteristic that you observe that made China particularly different from others like personalist, authoritarian region. And the other one is that if you compare the trajectory of the autocratization in China, which trend delay accord with the trend, the general trend of the autocratization right now. And we could think about it, and I am looking forward to having a discussion with you later. And that is the end of my presentation. Thank you for your listening.